Welcome to the final installment of the movement Jesus started. I decided to film this piece in front of this playground. It just represents a place where kids come, families gather, people do life here. And this piece, this episode is all about what does it look like for the church to engage people who live and play and work around parks just like this. What does it look like for the church to move into the world, for the body of Christ to live on mission and go outside the walls of our gathering to engage in relationships with people who are lost and broken and desperate for Jesus? What does it look like to invite them to Jesus, and what methods are helpful in a world that's changing at light speed? Ecclesiology is all about how do we contextualize our mission for the sake of Jesus, who's at the heart of it all. This episode is about not the forms and the full extent of everything that might be dumped into the bucket of ecclesiology, but about one core thing, and that is, how do we engage with people that need to know Jesus? How do we do it individually, and how do we do it together? That's the body of Christ on mission. Ken Primrose, who's a part of our Pioneering Initiatives group, lives in Oklahoma and has developed some strategies that make a huge difference. I'm so glad to have Ken share that strategy with you as this final piece. When he gets done, spend extended time with your friends, with your team, talking about what you heard God say to you and what you should be doing about it. God bless you, and thanks for going on this journey with us.
I've been asked to share a simple tool that I've used for more than a decade and see lots of fruit from to help people, you and I, think through how do people come to Jesus and how can we go on mission with Jesus to the world around us. Okay? As a church leader of the church that I started, one of my things I was sad, disappointed, frustrated with is that the lack of people I saw come to Jesus through our local church. And I struggled to find help in anywhere that wasn't just growth coming from people leaving one church and joining another church. So as one church grew, another church shrank. And how do people literally come to Jesus, and how can we partner with them in that? So I began to read and think and pray. One insightful thing I came across in about 4 or 5 different places was that through a historian, missiologist, and a sociologist, is that 80 to 90% of everybody that's come to Jesus throughout church history came to Jesus through a friend or a relative. Okay. Now the insight for me was, people by and large come to Jesus through long-term trusted relationships. Okay. That was a big deal to me. I said, okay. So I began to think through this and draw this out, and I'm just going to draw this out for us as a starting point. But what that means is that for someone who's a disciple, now a disciple is just, Jesus said in the Gospels, someone who listens to his words and puts them into practice in his life. That's a disciple, okay? So the person who's the disciple steps out of the church world, out into the world. And they look over here at the stranger. Now the stranger, the reason why someone's a stranger is because a disciple looks at them and they're strange because we don't know them at all. And if we have any real conversation with them, they're gonna say things that we disagree with, and they're gonna hurt our feelings, and they would probably reject us. So, stranger. Well, let's just say this person invites this person to step over here, and these two guys, for whatever reason, they actually become friends. They become friends. Okay? Well, then something happens. And that something is that a new space is formed. It's not the church, and it's not quite the world. It's not the church because one of this friendship, this relationship, actually belongs to Jesus. I know Jesus. But half of this relationship says, I don't know Jesus. I don't belong to Jesus. But they're friends. So there's something here. And this new space I call the fringe. And I call it the fringe just simply because the fringe just means the outer edge of a thing. And I mean the outer edge of the church, right? The outer edge of the church. And what that means is that this friendship right here has now formed a space, this kind of wonderful space that Jesus, I think we can look at, and if the numbers that I've come across are right, 80 to 90% of all the people that come to Jesus throughout church history come to Jesus through this space we would call the fringe. And here's what this means in a practical sense. Jesus said, Luke 10, hey guys, the harvest is plentiful. Its workers are few. So pray to the Lord of the harvest to send out workers into his harvest fields, right? We know that verse. But I think we can even say it a different way, because intuitively, kind of in our own gut, we kind of rationalize that, we're doing our part. We're building buildings and we're having these kind of cool church services, and people just aren't coming. They just don't want Jesus, Yeah, the harvest isn't plentiful. The workers are multitudes of workers, just harvest. I think Jesus would turn around. I think he'd say, no. I would say the same thing to you guys. The people that I'm working on, that I'm drawing to myself, that I'm wooing, that I'm speaking to, I'm moving around their lives, my Holy Spirit, and I'm drawing them to myself. There's a multitude of people that I'm doing that to. And they actually exist in your neighborhood, in your city, in your state, in your nation. The harvest actually is plentiful, but the workers are actually few. And if this is true, which I've found it over the decade, I think the longer I go, the more true this becomes, is that when Jesus is referring to workers, we could actually say for the church, it is these people who actually step out of our church world and make a friend of someone who doesn't know him. That's the worker that Jesus is looking for. So if we do not have the time, the energy, the wherewithal to make a single friend of someone who doesn't know Jesus, then we do not have the time and the ability and the willingness, honestly, to go on mission with Jesus. Okay. Here's going to be diagram number 2. Hopefully a simple idea. If you understood the first part, I think you're going to understand this. So I'm just focusing in on the fringe a little bit. Again, the disciple in the church, stranger in the world. How does a stranger become a disciple? So I'm going to look at how do people move through the fringe. Now, there's many ways you could theoretically think about this. This is the way I think about it, and it's been helpful for me and for others. So I'm just going to show you how I break this out. So I create some lines in the middle, and when someone moves through this space, they enter these 3 different sections, okay? So from a stranger, someone becomes an acquaintance. I'm not going to spell that all the way out, but okay. They become an acquaintance. So a stranger becomes an acquaintance when what? Okay? They're a nameless, faceless entity that I don't know. So to become an acquaintance, there's someone who I have recognized by face. I have introduced myself. So we've exchanged names. And then thirdly, if I saw them out in public in some place, it would be odd or awkward or rude if I didn't greet them. Okay? So the 2 things are, we've exchanged names, there'd be an expectation of greeting. Then someone becomes an acquaintance, right? Okay. Now they're acquaintance. Now, how does someone move from an acquaintance to a friend? Okay, a friend is this. Someone, 2 things again, who you have partied with more than once. And you kind of have a little bit of idea when I use that phrase, but I'm going to define it in a very specific way. So a friend is someone who you've partied with more than once. I'm going to define party in the next diagram. And number 2, you've exchanged stories. So as an acquaintance, you exchange names, the most superficial connection that people have, but it is a connection. Now, as a friend, you exchange stories. Now, this story doesn't have to be deep. You can say, what's your story? And they can say, I was born here. Here's where I went to school. Here's my kids, my wife, my job. And they may not share anything painful or, whatever. That's totally fine. It's okay. And you can share reciprocally, just in the same level that they do. This is not the space to try to kind of weave in theological bullet points to kind of share the gospel, okay? This is about you sharing your story of who you are and them sharing their story of who they are. Now, will Jesus come up as you share your story? I would imagine it would be hard not to have something about God in your story, but that's not the point. The point is you, who you are, right? Okay, now from a friend to what I'm calling a person of peace, okay? Now, the reason I'm using the term person of peace is out of Luke 10. This may not be the technical definition of the way Jesus used this term in Luke chapter 10, but I like it because Jesus used it. And in Luke chapter 10, what you see is someone declares the kingdom message to come to the kingdom, And then someone hears that message, and because of the message, they show that person hospitality. Okay? So even though it's not technically the same thing, it's close. It's close. Because here's what we're doing. With a person of peace, we are disciples, right? We're down here. We're disciples because we are listening and responding to the words of Jesus in our lives. And because of that, life is happening around us and through that rhythm of discipleship with the person of Jesus. Now, a person of peace, what we're doing is we're inviting that person to come alongside of us and observe our rhythm of listening and responding to Jesus, primarily through the scriptures, but it also has to do with my own heart, my circumstances, and the people around me, right? And as I invite them to observe, they accept the invitation and they practice, okay? So I'm inviting them to observe and they are accepting and they're practicing. Now, will that make someone a Christian, right? Not necessarily. Not any more than someone who's test driving a car means they own the car. Jesus had some pretty specific requirements of what it means to be a disciple. Now, this person who's alongside of you as a person of peace, what they're doing is they're watching you, and in some form or fashion, they have to want some element of the life that you live with God. There's something attractive about that. And they're saying, if this is the way you get it, show me. I want to do this alongside of you. I want to do it with you. So they begin, and they're just practicing. They're not fully convinced. They don't know that God is real or that Jesus is real or that all this works. But they're like, well, heck, I'll try it. So in essence, all they're saying is, if this is true, I'm taking steps to find out. So Jesus, if you're real, if you are the Messiah, I'm going to take your words, I'm going to put them in my life, and I'm going to see what happens. And guys, I promise you, that's all Jesus needs. Jesus is reaching people way more diligently than we are. That's all he needs. And that's all that we're trying to get people to in this phase right here, person of peace. Because the next one is, they wake up one day and they start identifying themselves as a fully follower of Jesus. They cross a line of allegiance in which they don't look back. And they become a disciple, okay? Okay, this is diagram number 3. And all I'm going to do now is we focused on the fringe, what it looks like when someone moves from a stranger to a disciple by moving from an acquaintance to a friend to a person of peace. I defined those words and gave you a real specific, overly specific definition, okay? Now what I want to do is talk about the transitions between those things and how do we invite and help people move from one place to another, okay? So first, from a stranger to an acquaintance, I'm going to use the term bless. How do we invite someone from a stranger to become an acquaintance, okay? I'm going to say these two things. One is we step into a new relational network, okay? That may feel like a big word, but all I mean by that is where groups of people collect for some reason, but there's a connection between them. So that can be like stamp collecting, it's a book club, it's parents on my kid's soccer team, it's the library, it's a coffee shop, it's riding bikes, it's the gym spin class. It doesn't matter. Anything that people get together and they form some kind of social network around, okay? Well, we step into a new social network. And number 2, we're friendly. Now, when I say friendly, that's really all I mean. I mean, like, we're just kind, we're nice, we introduce ourselves, we ask questions, we ask for help, we give help. We're friendly, okay? Now, if you step into a new relational network and you're friendly, you'll have more acquaintances than you know what to do with, okay? Now, how does someone go from an acquaintance to a friend, okay? Well, this is what I'm calling a party. Now, I mentioned this, but I didn't say what I meant. Okay, and here's what I mean. Now, obviously, you know it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun, but I'm being very specific when I say this. A party is something where 2 or more disciples are inviting an acquaintance, someone who doesn't know Jesus, to do something with them that they already do and enjoy together. Okay, now that felt so simple that it's like, well, that can't be a thing, but it's a thing. And it's a thing that we don't do. It's the thing that makes people from acquaintances to friends, is we party with them. So it can be a dinner party, it can be we go play basketball, it doesn't matter, anything in the whole wide world, but we invite them to do it with us. There's a reason why I say 2 or more believers, 2 or more followers of Jesus, because there is I'm not going to go into the theology of it, but there's a latent power built into the community of God. Jesus refers to it in John 17, Paul refers to it several times, and it's the idea of the fragrant aroma of Christ. That when the world looks at the way the church loves one another, they will know that Jesus was who he said he was. That's what John 17, that's what Jesus says in John 17. Now, it means that when we get together, we are exposing people to a powerful aroma that acts like a magnet. Now, we don't have to articulate all these little subpoints of doctrine. All we have to do is be ourselves, but be ourselves alongside others who follow Jesus. And the community of God exudes a powerful, yet very subtle influence. And that's what we're offering that to people. And it's powerful. And in a party, that's what we're doing more than anything else. Okay? So we're partying. So a party is those two things. Someone else who follows Jesus alongside of you, and you're invited to do something you already do and enjoy. Okay? From a party to a person of peace, what does this look like? Well, for us in CRM, it's going to look like DBS. Now, DBS is just the chosen model for a very simple and helpful kind of apostolic template for discipleship. So it's the rhythm of listening and responding to Jesus through the scriptures that hopefully we are doing some form or fashion ourselves. If we're not doing that ourselves, then this piece breaks down completely. Because we have to invite them into our lives in God, our rhythm of discipleship with Jesus. And at DBS, to listen and respond to Jesus, the Discovery Bible Study, where there will be lots of material on here in CRM, and so I'm not going to go into it right now, but that's the place where we invite them to come alongside of us. And remember, the person of peace is someone who is invited to observe your rhythm of discipleship with Jesus, and then secondly, they actually begin the process of experimenting, trying it out of curiosity. Okay? So this is what I call the fringe. So it's helping think through the idea of how does a stranger become a disciple, and what is our role when Jesus takes us fishing to help people, invite them through this process so that we will naturally see people come to Jesus through our lives. Thanks.